And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us for the marine portion of your broadcast. I'm meteorologist Emily Niebuhr. First, let's start out looking at our sea ice coverage. You can see we continue to see a loss of sea ice. We only have a little bit of sea ice north of Prudhoe Bay, and that's less than 80% concentration. Again, kind of that light blue color. You have to go pretty far off the coast of Mukhiagavik to reach sea ice. So we continue to see the seasonal melt. Let's look at tonight's weather. We do have a low pressure system in the western Bering with a front that is going to be impacting interior west portions of the state tonight. By Saturday, those fronts occlude, and we have, again, a stationary front with broad southwesterly flow across the Bering. And meanwhile, we have a ridge pushing in to the Gulf of Alaska. That's going to be causing a pressure gradient because there's also a trough moving across the area on Saturday. For Sunday, that system's front continues to progress further east while the low moves in towards the Chukchi. So here are the impacts of those systems on our marine weather. So for Saturday, for the southeast, we are expecting up to 6-foot waves near Ketchikan and 10-knot winds. So again, if you're going to be in some of these interior places, the waves could be varying a lot. So travel with caution. This is just sort of an average. Up to 3 foot near Skagway with winds up to 20 knots from the south. As you get out into the Gulf of Alaska, we are looking at waves from about 12 to 20 feet right off of Sitka. As you go further north near Nakitat, we're still looking at waves of 11 feet and winds generally of about 15 to 20 knots. As you move into Sunday, that pressure gradient is going to weaken a little bit. You can see that reflected. We're expecting to have waves about 2 to 3 feet across in interior portions and winds up to about 15 knots. As you go into the Gulf of Alaska, we are looking at waves about 7 to 8 feet, up to 9 feet off southeast of or southwest of Sitka, and winds generally 20 knots near the south, but about 10 knots off of Yakutat. Looking at your Saturday forecast for the North Gulf of Alaska, we have waves up to, again, 8 feet north of Homer, all the way up towards Kenai, winds about 25 knots. Even up near Anchorage, we're looking at waves about 6 feet and winds of 25 knots with that frontal system. So go into Shelikof Strait. North of that, we're looking at waves of about 6 feet, 5 feet off of Kodiak Island. Prince William Sound, waves of about 3 feet, winds about 20 knots. Again, it could vary in channeled terrain with that wind from that front. Outside of the Prince William Sound, we're looking at waves of about 8 to 9 feet, winds 15 to 25 knots. Sunday, we're still looking widespread waves of about 8 feet, winds 25 knots, waves up to 5 feet near Anchorage. South of the Gulf of Alaska, we're looking at waves of about 7 feet. Prince William Sound will have waves about 3 feet with winds up to about 20 knots. For your marine forecast for Saturday, for the Bristol Bay area, waves about 6 feet up to 8 feet near north of Port Hayden. South of the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, we're looking at waves about 5 to 8 feet and winds from the southwest of 25 to 30 knots. And again, up to 6 feet south of Kodiak Island and winds of about 25 knots. For Sunday, we're looking at waves of 9 to 11 feet in the Bristol Bay area with winds of 25 to 30 knots. South, we're still expecting waves for about 9 feet to 10 feet off of Kodiak Island to the southwest, southeast, and winds of about 25 to 30 knots. We go further west, we're looking at waves about 16 feet south of the western and central Aleutian Islands, with about 20 or 10 knots south of the eastern Aleutian Islands. And if you go north, we're still expecting waves about 15 feet to 10 feet, maybe 8 feet north of Unalaska. But again, fairly strong winds above gale level across much of the region. Sunday, that front moves to the east. So we're looking at waves of about 11 to 10 feet south of the Aleutian Islands and about 8 to 6 feet north of the Aleutian Islands. Waves or winds generally about 20 knots. For the west coast, Off the Pribilofs, we're expecting waves of about 16 feet for your Saturday. Winds, again, about 40 knots. So a strong jet across much of the Bering for your Saturday. Or even looking at near Hubert Bay, winds of about 30 knots, waves 6 feet. Near Nome, even waves about 5 feet, winds up to 25 knots. For Sunday, we're looking at waves of 4 feet near Nome with winds about 20 knots. And near the Pribilofs, we're looking at waves of about 11 feet, winds 20 knots. But those waves extend well into the Bristol Bay area of about 7 feet, winds about 25 knots. Along your North Arctic coast, we are in now most of the waters are ice-free. We're looking at waves of 2 to 4 feet, winds of about 10 to 20 knots. Off the Seward Peninsula, we are looking at waves of about 4 to 5 feet, winds about 20 knots. For your Sunday, as that low pushes in, waves are going to increase to about 7 knots, especially through the Bering Strait and channel terrain. Winds generally 20 to 30 knots, about 4 feet off of Wainwright, and about 6-foot waves along the North Arctic coast for your Sunday.